Begin transmission, March 31st, 2023. Episode 12. Introduction. In this episode we will examine the subversion taking place within the United States in order to get the nation towards a socialist society that at some point the Antichrist will then use as his seat of power, that will turn into a global government system. Currently in the subversion process the nation is in the later stages of destabilization and in the midst of normalization. This will be further explained by a psychological operations expert from KGB. We will also examine aspects of a few subversion organizations such as Antifa and Anonymous and how they are working towards the same goals of tearing down what has been known as the United States and establishing something else, along with ceasing Christian worship in the near future. Main content. Yuri Bezmenov was a psychological operations expert from KGB in Russia and died in 1993. He defected to the United States in the 1980s and presented his information to the public. The truth about subversion operations he presented and the warnings to American society was accurate, since his presentation of briefings that can be found on our channel. The United States is sliding into the danger areas that he warned about. Here are a few clips from one of his presentations discussing a few topics that affect each other within the subversion action being taken within the United States. Those hearing this should be thinking in terms of what is coming for the church, subversion of the church and destroying the foundational teachings of Christianity is a big part of the subversion effort, along with using pawns to destabilize the nation such as LGBTQ groups, Antifa, Anonymous or anyone else who feels like fighting for a cause without much thought or regard for what they are actually fighting for. This also includes groups who consider themselves patriot-loving Americans. Here are the clips.
So, on the stage of demoralization, obviously there are tendencies in each society, in each country, which are going to opposite direction from the basic moral values and principles. To take advantage of these movements, to capitalize on them, is the main purpose of the originator of subversion. So we have religion, we have education, we have social life, we have power structure, we have labor relations, unions, and finally we have law and order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? These are the areas of application of subversion. What it means exactly? In case of religion, destroy it, ridicule it, replace it with various sects, cults, which bring people's attention, faith, whether it is naive, primitive, doesn't really matter. As long as the basically accepted religious dogma is being slowly eroded and taken away from the supreme purpose of religion, to keep people in touch with the supreme being, that serves the purpose. Therefore, replace it, accepted, respected religious organizations with fake organizations. Distract people's attention from the real faith and attract them to various different faiths. Are being sent back from the Soviet Union here. Or if they were already in the United States, in the country which is the object of subversion, they spring to action. The sleepers go up. They slept for 15 to 20 years. Now they become leaders of groups, preachers, I don't know, public figures. Prominently they actively include themselves in a political process. All of a sudden we see a homosexual. 15 years ago he did his dirty job and nobody cared. Now he makes it a political issue. A political issue. He demands recognition, respect, human rights, and he rallies a large group of people. And there are violent clashes between him and police, his group and ordinary people, no matter what. It's black against white, yellows against green, doesn't matter where his division line goes. As long as this group come into antagonistic clash, sometimes militantly, sometimes with firearms, that is destabilization. process. But the result is the same. The next stage is normalization. Normalization is a very ironic word, of course. At that stage, the self-appointed rulers of the society don't need any revolution anymore. They don't need any radicalism anymore. So this is the reverse from destabilization. Basically, it is stabilizing the country by force. So all the sleepers and activists and social workers and liberals and homosexuals and professors and Marxists and Leninists are being eliminated physically sometimes. They've done their job already. Okay? They are not needed anymore. The new rulers need stability to exploit the nation, to exploit the country, to take advantages of the victory. Okay? So no more revolutionaries, please. Okay? So we allow them to... Okay, if you allow the criminals to have civil rights, go on and bring the country to the crisis. This is a bloodless way to do. Curb the rights. I mean, not to put them in prison. No, I'm not talking about putting all the gays from San Francisco in the concentration camp. Do not allow them to take political force. Do not elect them to the seats of power, whether it is municipality level, state level, or federal level. It has to be beaten in the heads of American voters that a person like that in the seats of power is an enemy. Do not be afraid of this word. It is an enemy. If he is not an enemy here, he will be here. Later on, he will be shot, of course. But at this point, he is an enemy. Okay? You are doing great service by denying him a right to capitalize on his own crazy ideas and become a powerful man, a man who uses the seat of power.
Again, this film was taken in 1980s. Notice how far we've come since his presentation. He and the audience were light-heartedly talking about gays being used in the subversion effort and then shot or discarded after their destruction of society was complete. The society has progressed far within 40 years. It is already taboo to talk in such ways. And it's interesting to recognize that the strongest force driving this agenda are the values of society that have become internalized or further cemented through social media. Russia many years ago said Facebook was a CIA operation. Maybe they were right. The LGBTQ and trans agenda is in the midst of not only growing and being widely accepted or promoted in America to soon being mandated into ideological structure of government structure, affecting work employment, church status with 501c3 tax exemption, and a large portion of society agreeing with the agenda and turning a blind eye to discrimination taking place against primarily Christian organizations and churches that will be labeled hate groups due to biblical teachings on marriage and sexual relationships acceptable to God, as clearly defined from the beginning of Scripture in the book of Genesis. Next we will examine some seemingly opposing viewpoints in our society. Are you familiar with the term, false dichotomy? False dichotomy is defined as a situation in which two alternative points of views are presented as the only options, even though other options are available. The American society is grounded in this as seen in politics, either Republican or Democrat, only two choices if one thinks that voting really matters. For or against, pro or con, in favor of, disgusted by. Social media has only furthered the division of primarily political ideology and identification to vilify and demonize the opposing side. Here is a clip of a Mormon theologian who accurately describes the concept of false dichotomy.
And this is one thing that Satan does very well, and it is extremely effective, unfortunately. And that is, he likes to create two things that appear opposite, and then these two things are the things that people focus on. And so they are too distracted from the third thing that is actually the thing that the Lord wants people to focus on. And we call this false dichotomy.
Society is being driven mad by believing they need to fight for their rights, left and right, and this thought has even spilled into the church, and good people are caught up in the cultural frenzy of latching onto ideology like MAGA, pro-Second Amendment, don't tread on me, and even being overly patriotic. The left does the same for their many causes such as gay pride, transgender, pro-abortion. Who is behind these opposing forces that keep us divided and unable to agree on anything? Ultimately it is Satan, and his clever and powerful minions in high places. It's to the point that your everyday silent majority mom and dad are even getting wrapped up in fighting for their rights, or protesting, or identifying with ideologies. Here is a clip of a woman who looks to be a mother talking about how if she doesn't show up to protest, that she believes her side will lose to the leftist radicals.
I do not want this to happen in Portland, but I am not going to let them get away with this kind of stuff. Where am I going to go? Where are you going to go? Where are your children going to go? When that kind of stuff continues and this system breaks down, I don't support BLM. I do support Black Lives. Black Lives Matter? No. They are a Marxist, communist organization. Mark my word.
What is Antifa? Why is it so massive? Why does the Antifa website redirect to the White House? Why does Keith Ellison support Antifa, and is openly Muslim? How does he continue to get elected as an AG? Here is a quick clip of that.
Tweeted out this semi-literate, unhinged tweet in support of Antifa. Ellison is the first Muslim elected into Congress and the first Muslim congressman with ties to Muslim terrorists and now Antifa terrorists. If you don't already know that supporting Antifa is treasonous for a politician, and that support of Antifa is support of attacks on members of almost any marginalized group that you could think of, and on everyone's civil rights.
So back to the question, what is Antifa? How does it exist? It is uncovered that there were many paid protesters by Serj during the first Trump campaign, and groups of these protesters remained on the payroll. Maybe it could even be proved that government officials, CIA, FBI, or other national, state, local departments are a part of influencing these destabilizing operations, protests and clashes. Was the CIA involved in the takedown of the World Trade Towers? If one looks into it, there are connections. But do average citizens let their internal knowledge put up roadblocks to looking into truths and accept lies because they've been conditioned to believe and accept certain premises and label anything else conspiracy theory? Yes, this is what's going on. It is conditioning, changing public opinion. Here are some clip segments on Antifa, and even some statements from one of its anonymous leaders from Portland, Oregon.
How many groups are operating in Portland? I linked up with Corey Elia, a community advocate journalist who had been covering the nightly protests since the beginning, to help me sort out who might be Antifa.
There's a big gradient in terms of what the protest consists of. How does this vary every night?
This crowd is not Antifa. It's a crowd of about a half dozen to maybe a dozen different organization groups.
The reality in Portland is that there are many small groups that organize across a decentralized network of loose collectives. Nobody is really in charge, but all the groups promote and talk to each other.
And every single one of them seems to have a slightly different message. Some are about reform, some are about complete abolishment of the current system. Just people wanting to protest. And yes, there are certain individuals usually coming out and looking to just destroy stuff. And then like there are direct action nights where you will see just people all in black showing up to occupy public spaces, be loud, throw basically what looks like a block party, and on the edge of it there's some vandalism going on and stuff like that. I mean, that's...
Tell me a little bit about the work you do.
We collect information over long periods of time to provide relevant information and useful information to the community that's trying to keep themselves safe from fascist organizing and fascist violence. So that means doxing people at times.
How active has Rose City Antifa been in these recent protests here in Portland?
We don't feel, especially as a, say like a majority white organization that specifically focuses on anti-fascism, that it is our place to try and dictate the goals or the direction of a movement that is led by Black women and young Black people for the most part. We're not organizing any protests. We are, other than those that are specifically intended to counter fascist organizing or fascist repression.
While we were in Portland, Rose City Antifa published an article exposing the extreme right-wing connections to organizers that were holding a rally our last day. The rally at the now famed Justice Center was attended by several right-wing groups including Patriot Prayer, the Proud Boys, Back the Blue, anti-Marxists, and plain old Trump supporters. Do you want to kill Trump supporters?
No, we don't want to kill Trump supporters. We want to stop fascists from organizing using whatever tactics are most effective.
Here is another clip from Joe Rogan explaining Antifa.
You're willing to overlook some awful on your side, and you're willing to exaggerate some on the other side, but everybody's on the same team, so you have to pretend these people lighting churches on fire aren't these people lighting schools on fire and lighting courthouses on fire. The mostly peaceful. Oh, it's mostly peaceful, Adam
burning
Curry.
in the background.
I saw someone again say this because of what happened in Atlanta.
Yeah, the Cop City thing.
Yeah, and they were
there
calling
was literally
this
a cop car on fire.
Anyway, they're calling it mostly peaceful
In CNN's backyard. I know, it's fantastic.
You're not the propaganda department. You can't define things in a way to calm people down. That's not what your job is.
But that's
But you're bull people. You're acting as a propagandist. Like that's not. It's not mostly peaceful when a car's on fire.
Here is a clip about Anonymous, a bit dated but relevant.
Greetings, citizens of the world. We are Anonymous.
Remember this guy? Anonymous, that group of activists and hackers, is back amid global protests against police brutality. So let's refresh on who or what Anonymous is.
Citizens of the world. Anonymous has observed for some time now the trajectory of justice in the United States with growing concern.
Anonymous is a collective mostly known for its hacking exploits, but it has no central organization. It has no acknowledged leader either. The only public face is its infamous Guy Fawkes mask, the British rebel forming its trademark grin. And because anyone can call themselves a member, it has evolved into more of a brand name than a formal group. That nebulous association also means that Anonymous has no real unifying mission, beyond wreaking digital havoc on those its members say need justice served.
We have seen how the law is wielded less and less to uphold justice, and more to exercise control, authority and power in the interests of oppression or personal gain.
Anonymous was originally born more than a dozen years ago on internet chat forums, and shot to fame for organizing basic but effective attacks to bring down websites or other online systems. So-called hacktivists have taken credit for attacking the CIA, Sony, PayPal, and numerous government websites, protesting anything from WikiLeaks to whaling in Iceland. Over time, it got bigger to include non-hackers as well. The Guy Fawkes mask became a common sight at protests for various causes worldwide.
Anonymous stands for freedom. Throughout everyone, we all have the right to protest. We have the right to a free life.
But they'd largely been away from the spotlight in recent years, until the end of May. Long-standing anonymous social media accounts began attracting millions of followers and retweets, projecting them back into news feeds. Many boosted tweets opposed police actions, defended Black Lives Matter, or faulted President Donald Trump. And one of the accounts claimed credit for knocking a Minneapolis police website offline. It is unclear who or what is driving the resurgence. Even one of the heavily boosted old accounts, Your Anon News, said it had no idea what was going on. Twitter said it had seen no evidence of substantial coordinated activity among long-standing accounts, but that some users try to associate with the group to gain followers. Experts have said mechanical amplification is at play, where a flood of new accounts are created, echoing its tagline, "We are Legion, expect us."
These groups examined here are raging, but there is an abundance of causes to stand for, deep passions to be held by individuals. The notion that everyday citizens must stand for something, must fight for a cause, this is actually helping to bring the country to a breaking point. If people simply didn't care, life would be much more peaceful and simple. But the days of peace and simple living for the American dream are not in our future. Rather the opposite. Do you see the developments taking place in American society, in our world? Do you track trends? Do you remember key events? Do you analyze the point we're at today compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20, 30, 40 years ago? It is difficult for many, especially if heavily influenced by social media and culture. It conditions the mind. Television is bad enough at brainwashing. Now with tailored internet and unlimited technology, it's much easier to get sucked into the subversion trap taking place. It's interesting to observe Yuri Bezmenov that it takes 15-20 years to radicalize a generation. He referenced the 60s as being a transition point for the hippie generation taking positions of power. Where are we on the glide path now? Was the year 2000 an indicator? Or the intentional destruction of the World Trade Towers by our own government? Believe what you like, but if you're watching this content, likely this thought is well understood. So again, since the year 2000, is this Gen Z generation the fertile ground that will take on the subversion of turning America into the New World Order, Antichrist global state? Can our point on the glide path be reversed through strategic efforts? Yuri Bezmenov mentioned that it also takes about 20 years to reverse course from socialism. A simple protest or key figure talking head like Tucker Carlson isn't going to be enough. An objective look at the subversion will reveal that this train can't be stopped. The Antichrist is on his way. Obama, the community organizer, is hard at work, working with Trump. It's all a show. They are all on the same team. Which of the two choices of the false dichotomy are you siding with? Is there a third option? Yes, there is, and it's the one that both sides are conditioned not to accept, and that is Jesus Christ. Are the two false dichotomies, known as the left and the right, soon going to unite against the church and cast it out of society? Wake up, people, read the book of Revelation as it predicts these things. In Revelation 12 verses 13-17 it mentions Satan sending a flood after God's people. The following is from Malakian's commentary about these verses. The woman is the church. Listener, take note. Quote, the first attack on the woman is pictured as persecution by the dragon. From this she escapes by flight, but the subtlety of the enemy finds another device. The foe, now described as a serpent, pours forth water as a river to sweep away the woman. The emblem is not uncommon in the Bible. Invasion is described as an overflowing flood. The same emblem is used in Psalm 74 verses 2-6 to describe the uprising of a people's ill will. The floods, the rivers, the waves of the sea, are employed to express popular movements. The woman that cannot be destroyed by positive persecution may be swept away by a hostile public opinion. It is not the rulers alone who stand up against the Lord and his church. An infuriated populace may be stirred up against them. The temper of the mob occasioned as much suffering and as many deaths in early Christian days as did the political authorities. Ill-regulated popular impulses, leading to violence and unwise action, whether nominally for Christianity or against it, have done enough of the devil's work in the world." Unquote. We ask you again, do you see what's developing in our society? Can it be stopped? Will the church even be able to operate if 501c3 is taken away due to being labeled an LGBTQ hate group? Can you project this on the near future glide path we're on? It just recently came out for government and military that pronouns must be respected and it will be considered sexual harassment and will not be tolerated by offenders. Likely there will soon be some made examples of, a new quote-unquote Quran for the mindless masses to fixate their attention on and label a violin of progress in society. Just recently a trans student killed some Christians at a school. Does the public have sympathy for this possibly bullied trans student and thus somewhat justified in killing those Christians who may have not openly welcomed her, its ideas, public opinion and acceptance is driving all of what's taking place, or is the boundary for what those behind the scenes mark the next milestone at? Upcoming shortly on the calendar is the Transact Out Day. What goodies will be in store for society with this event or progressing into Gay Pride month of June? Here is a clip of a Christian doctor who was fired from his job for refusing to acknowledge the trans or pronoun agenda. Notice how he is vilified. Take note that he is elderly, white, male. This is from a few years ago. Here is the clip.
Explain to us why you have these views, David, because you have a very deep religious belief.
Well, I do. I don't think there's any big deal here. Most of humanity throughout most of history have believed this, believed it on the basis of scientific evidence, believed it on the basis of how do we assign gender to people. When I use the word gender, I use it in the same as sex, assigned at birth. And yes, you mentioned my religious views. I'm a Bible-believing Christian. I believe that God made mankind male and female. And I believe that this is extremely important to us as a nation, as a generation, that we uphold this truth.
But Dr. Can I just say, this truth, whatever you deem to be the truth or whatever, in today's world, this ain't going to change. Right? It's not going to change. You've lost a job over all of this. Why don't you? Let's start with the easiest option first. Why don't you just go, yeah, whatever, you mightn't believe it or not, but why don't you just tick a box and save your job?
Well, first of all, it would be dishonest for me to do that. I would be, and lying is sinful. It would be sinful before God. And secondly, it's the same thing, isn't it? I do not believe it. And if we have no doctors...
Do you medically not believe it?
I medically not believe it. If we have no doctors or nurses with consciences anymore, anything can happen. We have to be allowed to have a conscience when we work as doctors and nurses, even if we disagree with each other on some things.
What about somebody who has had the full transgender surgery and believes that they have changed their sex, maybe from male to female, female to male, and they are living as that person?
They have the right to
Would
tell me...
Would you still not call them by the gender that they prefer?
They have the right to call themselves by whichever gender they wish, but as a Christian, I believe that gender is assigned at birth and that God made them male and female and that this cannot be changed.
Monroe, assigned at birth, you were assigned a gender at birth, but you believed that was the wrong gender, right? So Monroe, doctor, is the person she is today, but on, I presume, your birth certificate, it says you are a different gender.
Yes.
Yes. Now, doctor, do you have a problem with that? Monroe is comfortable in her own skin, who she is, what she is. Would you actually say to her, I don't recognise that?
Can I actually just say surgery doesn't actually have a bearing on how far someone is with their transition. You can be trans and have not even transitioned yet, and that's actually the most crucial point.
So the minute
when people
you
are their most vulnerable and they need to be believed.
See, more this is where it becomes very complicated, very confusing, and actually I think perhaps makes it easier for the doctor, because he's actually saying if physically you are...
But that is his job to help people, and he's not doing his job by not helping people.
There's never been anybody that I've refused to help, ever, not once.
Well, we're talking potentially, aren't we?
So we have a situation here. Take Facebook, where we have 78 genders now, I'm told. Now, when gender becomes indeterminate, you can have 7 billion genders. Or you can decide, or you can believe that gender is assigned at birth. Now, if gender is assigned at birth, it follows automatically that gender cannot change. It cannot change. It's impossible.
Gender identity. You're confusing that with sex.
So you're talking medically and physically.
I'm talking medically and physically as well. It's recognised within medical practitioners that this is the process and this is how you help trans people. And this guy is saying, no, I'm not going to help people because I don't want to refer to them how they are because of my religious beliefs. If this is his religious beliefs, then he should not be in the field, and he was right to lose his job.
You can't write off Christianity or religion just like that.
I can. Any religion. I'm not writing off Christianity. I'm writing off religion if that's going to stop you from helping people. You're a public servant.
So
working for the NHS of taxpayers' money, you should be helping people, not using your own beliefs to play God, essentially.
If you remove everybody like me from the NHS, there'll be no NHS left.
I'm not talking. You can have your own. You can have your own beliefs, but don't impose that on other people.
Okay, but just we have to have people with belief, and they have to be able to hold that belief.
Let me
say what that belief is in the NHS.
Let's talk about
I'm not saying that you can't be a Christian. I'm talking about you imposing that and affecting people that are highly vulnerable and need your help.
Okay, they may be highly vulnerable. They may be in lots of situations that they don't want to be in.
84% of young trans people are either self-harming or have attempted suicide.
What he's saying is, I suppose there has to be some order to things. And when you look back, I mean, how does genealogy continue? How do records be kept when someone...
We're talking about gender identity. We're not talking about biological sex.
Gender and sex are the same.
They're not the same, and that's widely accepted.
We're living in a gender-confused generation. Our children in our schools are being moved into a gender confusion situation. Our parents need to stand up on this. Our parents need to defend their children. We are in a situation where we are completely changing the society in which we live.
But we're not dealing with confusion. It's not just happening, David, that you can't stop it. That's just the world changing.
No, it's being driven.
And people are becoming more accepting of how people feel.
Well, that's like something out of George Orwell's 94. This is the way it's always been. But it's not. Throughout history, find anywhere in Christian history other than today when any Christian believed this.
You can believe it yourself. You can believe it yourself, but don't impose that on other people.
Off Christianity.
No, I'm not writing off Christianity. You can practice Christianity on your own time. You cannot be a public servant from your point
where men and women do not have a conscience. We have to have a conscience to practice medicine.
No.
Okay.
You can have a conscience, but you also signed an practice of ethics to serve people and not just the ones you choose.
Monroe, please, is this based purely on a religious belief as opposed to a scientific
bigotry.
Belief?
Thank you. By God, I cannot go along with that.
Well, it is. It's bigotry.
Thank you very much.
We'll give you the last word.
Sorry, I've lost the track. Is it science? I believe that science is very... I believe that the science I studied at primary school on anatomy was very clear. The science I studied on genetics was very clear. Yes, but the anatomy hasn't changed and the genetics haven't changed.
Society has.
We laugh inside when we hear Christian talk about America as a Christian nation, founded on Christian principles. It is tragic how the church is sleeping at a time when it will likely face the fight of its life in the Western world. There may be some non-Christians, atheists, New Agers or occultists watching this. Maybe you are even hoping for the demise of the church. A word of warning to you, when these things start occurring, take note. And if there remains independent thought, as yourself objectively, if there is a God, if Jesus is really God, if his church and his people are in fact the people that will inherit eternal life, then it makes logical sense that Satan, the prince of this world and his powerful minions will do what they can to exterminate it. There is only one creator of this world. It isn't up for debate. He is Jesus Christ. Bible prophecy foretells what is about to happen. You have the responsibility to make a decision about who the Christ is before his second coming. History is currently on a glide path towards the revealing of the Antichrist, who will be worshipped by the world. Watch our video on Revelation on the For the Tribulation Saints channel for further info. Here is some further evidence of mounting pressure that has come and is coming against the church. In November 2022, DHS declared marking of 2 years since the breach of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, and potential socio-political developments connected to ideological beliefs or personal hostility. The bulletin said, targets of potential violence include public gatherings, faith-based institutions, the LGBTQI+ community, schools, racial and religious minorities, government facilities and personnel, U.S. critical infrastructure, the media, and perceived ideological opponents. Unquote. In June 2022, Rod Dreher of the American Conservative wrote, quote, "The Roe decision will be announced this month. It will be an apocalypse, unveiling, for Christians in America, as the true meaning of the de-Christianization of the United States will be made manifest. I keep telling people to prepare themselves, their families, and their religious communities for what's coming. Specifically, if your church is in any way publicly associated with the pro-life movement and all Catholic churches, even those known to be liberal, are by default. You had better now, this very day, start organizing vigils to surround and protect your church buildings. We saw in the mostly peaceful burning streets 2 years ago what the left in this country is capable of, and what the ruling class in this country will excuse, even support. Unquote. CatholicVote.org as of January 2023 has these statistics relating to increased aggression against Catholic churches since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Quote, "The attacks on Catholic churches have been widespread across the country, affecting 42 states plus D.C. The states with the most attacks are California, 42, New York, 28, Pennsylvania, 19, Texas, 15, Colorado, 14, New Jersey, 14, Massachusetts, 12, Florida, 11, Washington, 11, and Oregon, 10. Hotspots with large clusters of attacks include New York City, 25, and the metro areas of Denver, 13, Los Angeles, 13, San Francisco, Bay Area, 11, Washington, D.C., 10, Boston, 10, Portland, Oregon, 9, Seattle, 7, Chicago, 6, and Houston, 5. Some of the churches have been attacked multiple times. A Catholic Vote has found that only about 25% of the cases have had an arrest made in connection to the attack. The Biden administration has thus far refused to act to protect Catholic churches and stop these acts of domestic terrorism. In December 2021, Catholic Vote sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice, DOJ, calling on them to act, pointing to a federal statute which requires the Attorney General to investigate and prosecute such crimes. The vandalism we are seeing today is quickly rising to levels that haven't been seen since the late 1800s and early 1900s from organized groups such as the Know Nothings and the Ku Klux Klan, Catholic Vote President Brian Birch wrote, unquote. Here is a final short clip from the Chuck Missler Ministries about this false dichotomy and the subversion taking place regarding the church and Christians.
The steady and slow but persistent movement of our society to a godless society. They call themselves liberal, but they're tolerant of everything other than Christianity. They want to make this idea that we're the ones that are intolerant, and yet they're the ones that characterize Christians as unintelligent.
A war is coming for the church and it isn't ready. The woman has been riding the beast ever since Rome created the Catholic Church. We are close to a time when church and freedoms of worship as we know them will dramatically change. We are close to a time when not only will instances of offense such as sexual harassment, misgenderizing be punished, but members of conservative society and the church will be doxxed in the future, will be chastised, will be punished. And will the foretold execution of the saints take place through these events, or will a rapture occur? There are differing opinions on that, but the question isn't if these things will occur but how close are we to them occurring? Maybe we are closer than you think. 100 years, 50 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years or less? Tick-tock. Enjoy freedom as we can now. Make a decision about Christ if you have not intentionally done so. Your eternal future depends upon it. This has been a broadcast of the non-anonymous charity. End transmission.